I'm Jason Klamm, and this is the Comedy on Vinyl podcast. The year is 1971. The album. I think we're all Bozos on this bus. The artist, the Firesign Theatre. My guests this week, Phil Proctor and Taylor Jessen. We're doing the history of Firesign Theatre again.
Yo.
Yeah. I'm just going to show this to the audience, and I don't know if they can even seen it.
There's this famous group. They sold lots of records.
Bunch of hippies.
I've heard of them.
Austin and Chong.
Oh yeah, there's a picture of them in my book.
Well, look at
great.
that.
Where's my fortune cookie? Available at Amazon.com, wherever good books can be ordered.
That is totally a book that people can buy, isn't it, Mr.
It is.
Proctor?
It's a viable book, and it's actually got some viable stories in it. So
it's a delightful book. But when you were telling us about the book originally, I went up to San Francisco for the first time, and I made a weird macabre trip to the Golden Dragon, just specifically, which is still there.
Yes.
it's not called the Golden Dragon.
No, it's called something else. But I had to do some hunting.
If I may just throw in, I found in digitizing the entire goddamn Firesign Theatre archive, I found an amazing air check, and it's Proctor and Bergman the day after, or possibly the day of, depending on what time it happened. An air check, you're on the radio and you're telling a DJ exactly what happened. It's amazing.
Oh, wow.
How completely calm and sort of not bemused, but just sort of, oh well, that's what just happened.
Yeah.
So the whole story is going to.
We were able to tell the story, but for months afterwards, whenever there was a backfire, Bergman would get freaked, spooked.
I would imagine.
But it was such a wonderful. It always feels so good to survive a near-death experience. That you feel. Now you're here for a reason. You just talk about it.
Right.
And, carry on.
What year was that?
77.
77. Oh, okay. This album.
It was the day that my wife and I found out she was pregnant.
Oh my God. That's crazy. That's insane.
It's in the book. That's why it's called Where's
The
My
book.
Fortune Cookie? And that's Bergman and me cowering under the table.
Everyone on the podcast, please look at this photo of Bergman.
What's that?
Everyone just listening.
My pocket is singing to me. Isn't this nice? I wonder what it is. Yeah. Well, see, Bozos. We're all Bozos on this bus, right? Good.
So 1971, this album comes out. What was the impetus for actually making the thing? Because it is, for those who haven't heard it, it's a single story. It is as narrative as you guys get.
It was actually nominated for a Hugo Award.
Yes, I saw that.
Science Fiction Award, because it was a pretty complete and graspable story. Well, I think I knew we wanted to write something about the computer revolution and where was that going to take us, and we also wanted to. We've been wanting to do a theme park album for a long time because it just seemed like so ripe for a social satire. Disney World type thing, but government oriented. And so we combined those two ideas because at the time holograms were also beginning to become more available to people. And so all of these kind of technological futuristic ideas inspired us to tell the story of somebody trying to close down the theme park, the government, basically. Politically, I think it was the Nixon era, was it? And we were still trying to get him out of office and end the Vietnamese War. So all of these elements seem to fit well into this particular kind of a theme. And what really tipped the scale in that direction was I had gone to a work fair in Hollywood, and there was one of the booths was demonstrating like the future of interactivity with a computer program called the ELIZA program.
Okay.
And it was a psychiatrist program. You would type in a question and the psychiatrist would respond to you and you'd respond to him.
Weird. Okay.
Okay. But what was particularly captivating for me was that there was a big cardboard barrel, all right, that was filled with reams of this paper.
Yeah,
it was the old printer, the kind with the perforated edges, and the continuous roll of paper. Well, this barrel was just filled with these things.
Oh my God!
And I dove in and pulled them out. And what won me over was that the computer program code was also part of the transcript.
Okay.
That's where we got Unhappy MacNam.
Uh-huh.
It said Unhappy MacNam. It said things like that. There was all these, these nerds had created these original computer programs in a very early phase of this kind of computer language.
Phil, was there any specific reference in there to Dr. Memory?
Yes, it's direct readout memory.
Oh my God! Because Dr. Memory was a thing you'd been riffing on since like 1970 in the radio shows.
Oh, we had, huh?
And then suddenly it was right there.
That's
I mean, it was a running.
readout
It was a running gag where you'd say Dr.
Memory. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
But so I guess we reinvented that.
It's amazing.
Love it.
And put it in there. But the other really weird thing about it. First of all, people have to know that. And I'll demonstrate this. Well, let's see.
Let's see if it works.
Let's see. How can I get it? I played the part of a hacker, actually. Mm-hmm. We didn't have the language yet. There was no language for a disgruntled ex-employee who comes in and tries to get into the computer in order to fiddle with it. Mm-hmm. But that's what I did. Yeah. And I planted a virus. That was also not a word at the time. Mm-hmm. I planted a virus, which was a question based on the binaural aspect of a computer thought, negative, positive, yes, no, mm-hmm. that the computer couldn't answer. Mm-hmm. And that caused it to go into a loop and destroyed the computer, mm-hmm. froze the computer. Blew it up, too, and I think we actually blew it up. So anyway, my character gained access to the computer by saying, "This is worker speaking. Hello." And the computer would say, "Hello, worker. How can I help you?" Well, many years ago, unbeknownst to us, when we were at a public appearance and record signing up in, Berkeley?
It was in Berkeley,
in Berkeley.
75.
A young man came and got his records and hung out with us. And Taylor here, our archivist, came across some pictures of this particular signing, this appearance. And we identified this young man as Steve Jobs.
It's insane.
Okay? Mm-hmm. Now, I'd forgotten that. Well, I'm
sure.
Probably, Steve Jobs. I don't think he'd started his dynasty yet, his empire.
Just a few years away.
Yeah,
he was a young man.
He was right on the cusp.
And but many years later, when I did voices for A Bug's Life, which David also played a major part in for Pixar, mm-hmm. We had a big cast and crew party up in San Francisco or wherever Pixar was.
Emeryville.
Yeah. And I met Steve Jobs because he had just bought into Pixar.
Okay, yeah.
Okay? And he was going to apply his computer knowledge to their wonderful studio. And I met him, and he said, "I'm a big fan of yours." And I was very impressed and very happy to hear that. Well, now we're 2027, wherever we are. And if you have an iPhone and you ask Siri this, you'll hear, "This is worker speaking. Hello. This is..."
Hello, Klamm. What function can I perform for you? LOL.
I love it so much.
Okay. So this is called an Easter egg?
Mm.
Yeah. Steve Jobs put in an Easter egg as an homage to the Firesign Theatre. Mm-hmm. Okay. And it just blows my mind.
Of course.
I mean, it's absolutely fantastic. So, not only that, but Siri, as you can hear, imitates the voice of the computer.
Yes, doesn't do the regular
and then
Siri
says
voice.
"laugh out loud."
Yeah, so good.
So it's really a great homage.
Mm-hmm. Goes to the machine about the ghost in the machine.
The ghost in the machine. And sometimes it doesn't always work, but if you say, "Why does a porridge bird lay his egg in the air?" she will say, "You can't shut me down that easily." Okay, and because that was the Zen question that my character Klamm asks of the computer that basically shuts it down. And that question, which we're often asked about, what does it mean? That question came to me from a girlfriend of mine named Angel, a Texas girl, lived in Austin, out in the suburbs. And she told me a story one day that she used to talk to leprechauns in her backyard when she was a little girl.
Okay.
And one of the leprechauns asked her that question. Why does the porridge bird lay his egg in the air and then laughed and ran away? And that's all in the album.
Holy shit.
And of course, I did research in Irish mythology to try to figure out what is this? And the closest I came to it was the story of a king who was deposed and lived in a cave on porridge for years before he was able to get back on the throne.
All right.
Why does the poor rich king, eat porridge? Pour porridge on his bird. So anyway, it's all
this
of that
happened to her when she was a kid, not when she's adult and maybe had ingested some interesting stuff.
No.
It was all from her childhood.
Oh, her childhood. She was a little girl.
Interesting.
She grew up into a big girl, a very beautiful woman angel. Anyway, so that's some of the back story.
I'm curious. Okay, this is going to come from a tech nerd thing, not knowing a whole lot. Which, by the way,
a friend of yours?
Yeah, a friend of mine, not me. Just okay. So if you're seeing all the program, what year was that you saw all the programming and stuff? 69, 70 then?
About 70. Might have even been 71.
What did you understand of it when you saw it, though?
What I understood of it was that it was a program that worked. I mean, you'd say something to like, hi doctor, why are you so serious about everything? And the doctor would say, well, how do you feel about that? There's that kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And I was very inspired by it. I thought that was a wonderful path to go to, and it really opened my mind to the whole future of interactivity with machines. Because that's always, look, I'm a science fiction nerd, always have been.
Sure.
And one of the major themes of science fiction from the very beginning has always been artificial intelligence versus human intelligence. Robots.
Yeah. Yeah.
In our cut-up film, J-Men Forever, that Peter and I put together using Republic cliffhanger serials, there were several superhero films that featured huge robots.
Sure.
Right?
Sure, yeah.
Running amok and killing people
of
and
course.
things like that.
Yeah.
So it's another one of those themes. Artificial intelligence was something that we all got together on. We all felt that was going to be something that would be beleaguering us in the future. And it's true.
Yeah. There. Do you recall? I apologize. I'm going to go all over the place. But one of the things that intrigues me the most is the part that creeps me out the most, and that's the voice of specifically of the Nixon robot. Basically, there's just so much effect under that flutter. What the hell was what did you use? Do you know?
Feels like a Leslie speaker.
Yeah,
right?
we did it through a Leslie speaker.
You have to explain to me what that is.
Well, it's a musical. You can probably explain it better, but
everybody should of course read the big Beatles Studios book, because that's when I think John Lennon's mind was blown when he finally got a hold of the Leslie speaker and they took it apart to make his voice sound weird for the mid-60s. Yeah, Rubber Soul or Revolver era stuff. Basically revolving speaker inside another cabinet.
Oh, holy shit. That's how that works?
Yeah, the Leslie
insane.
was meant to be just an effect for, I think it started out as just supposed to be an effect for guitars.
Yeah, but then they applied it to keyboard.
Of course, yeah. Now I know what you're talking, as we're describing it, I'm getting it.
Yeah, it's a physical effect, and you put a second microphone next to the speaker.
That's another very interesting thing about the evolution of the recording industry, which we, over our long career, were able to not only witness but participate in. The thunder that is on the album, I think primarily in the Floyd Dam section, where the Bozos are in the bus, and they're apparently the windows are all holograms, and they're experiencing a terrifying travelogue. The sound of the thunder in that, and I think also when I think of it, it might have gone back even to Up Against the Wall of Science. Right, we used some thunder in there too. That thunder I created by physically walking upstairs in the Columbia studio where the echo chamber was located.
Sure.
And beating with my fists on the various machine that had all these repeating sections to it, so that your voice would go whoa, 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 like that.
Right. Awesome.
Crap.
So it's electronic thunder, artificially created by my own fists.
That's insane.
But that was the fun thing about what Firesign was able to do, and the reason why again we wanted to do a technological album, because we were kids in a toy shop. We were playing with all this wonderful equipment, all this state-of-the-art stuff. And because of John McClure had ensured that we were signed to Columbia under a spoken arts contract, we didn't have to pay for studio time.
Oh, right. Yeah. Okay.
So we could really indulge ourselves, And that was, again, one of the very liberating aspects of Firesign Theatre that allowed it to be so very unique in the recording industry and to evolve and experiment with new forms of technology.
Yeah. Was there, in the writing of this, was there any improv, as it seems, was a big part of your other stuff? Yeah.
There's always improv in what we do. But, of course, the machine responses, those were carefully written and thought out. But there's always aspects of improvisation in what Firesign would do, depending again on the complexity of the album or the strength of the narrative of the album. Many times, and I write about it in the book when I discuss the writing techniques that we had, we would agonize over certain ideas or agonize over certain scenes and fight and no, it should go this way, it should go that way, and then we'd finally compromise, we'd type it up, we'd take it to the studio and throw it away and improvise. Because the studio was kind of like for us it was an out-of-town tryout and it was opening night, because again we had the luxury to be able to rehearse as long as we wanted until we felt that we got it. Taylor has among our archives, which are soon to be shipped to Washington, D.C., because the Library of Congress purchased the Firesign.
Oh, we can say that finally. Okay,
good.
We can mention it. I'm good.
Yes,
all right.
For a tidy sum, thank you. And I think Trump signed the check himself, so it's all
That's a
legitimate.
delight.
We're gonna
But he signed it in
cash
Russian,
fast.
so I don't know if it's going to be a problem or not.
Well,
but
at least you can read it. That's
I can. Da pravda. So anyway, yes, there's probably some scripts in there that have all of the changes that we tried to make.
That's great.
During those sessions. It
so
looks
good.
like hieroglyphics.
I'm sure,
I don't know how we ever read it,
Yeah, I think we got like track sheets.
Yeah.
But eventually, because again we had the luxury to rehearse, the scenes and the characters would become like second nature to us, and we could almost like literally throw the script away, and play off of one another. We're in, you got earphones on, and you're in an isolation booth, and somebody else is way over there in the studio. So it's all in our head, and which was great because that's how we wanted the audience to experience it as well. Movies of the mind. Yeah. So the technique of recording in that way and interacting live with all of the partners, it was tried and true, and we did it over our whole 50-year career. And that came out really, that technique came out of radio. Yeah. Okay? Yeah. Where we'd sit around a table with earphones on. Sure. And, hear one another and improvise, and sound effects and music would come in. Earl Jive was a real jokester and our engineer for the Dear Friends radio show. And he used to just drop sound effects on us unexpectedly. Oh my God. And then we would have to improvise and react to those as well. So a lot, very musical, very jazzy, riffing off of one another and all that. And that worked for us for our entire career. We could always do that together. And it from the very first time that we all sat around a table on Radio Free Oz back in 1967, was it?
It's
November
It's November '66.
November 66.
It's that's what you keep saying, writing, and there's no goddamn recording of that original thing. If only there was this thing. But from the very beginning, you guys knew the date, even if you didn't have a recording of the thing.
That's gone? That's not out there?
Yeah, we don't have.
Well, nobody. I don't think anybody was recording Radio Free Oz at the time, except maybe this one weirdo, Carlos Hagen, who had this wonderful archive, and he wanted to keep all the recordings.
Pioneer.
Totally. He wanted to keep as many recordings of LA radio as he could. So he just, even before he knew about Firesign, he was recording Radio Free Oz.
Did Carlos become a woman? Was he? No, that was somebody else.
Not that I know of.
Castellaneta. He became.
Now we're talking about somebody else. No,
I'm gender neutral on the subject.
This is my barbaric yawp to the universe. God damn it! Why don't we have a recording of that particular date?
Well, you sound so frustrated at all of this. But you've done such a great job
when you know what's in the archive, suddenly you become very aware of what you don't have.
What you don't have. Well, that's why I'm here.
Yeah, of course. At least the information's consistent, and it's not like you get a different date every time. So
exactly.
Yes,
that's
right.
Once the technique,
I know how I am with my own memory, and I can never remember when I started my own shit.
Once time travel is available, we will know exactly where and when to
David has written a book called Fighting Clowns, I think it's called, that's available at Bear Manor, where also I wrote a book. I finished 2 projects that Peter and I were working on before he passed away. And one is called Americathon, the skits behind the screenplay.
All right.
I should have brought you copies of it. I'm sorry.
Don't worry about it.
But you
Next
can
time.
go to Bear Manor Press and get it. And it's got nice pictures in it, and it tells the story of our experience with Neil Israel from the and it contains 2 transcripts of 2 shows that we did. Gothamathon, which was the original iteration, where Peter and I would come into a town and explain to the audience that the town was going to go bankrupt unless we could raise money, and that's why we're having this telethon. And Peter was, Jerry, he was the host. He'd been up for 7 days, and then he would invite all of these lower echelon grade B acts on, which was me, and then I would introduce another act, and that was Peter.
Right.
So we played all these crazy characters in it. Neil Israel caught the show at Paul's Mall in Boston and said to us, I had starred with him in the film Tunnel Vision, which was his first movie, with Chevy Chase and various other wonderful Howard Hesseman. Oh God, everybody was in that movie. But he wanted to make a movie out of it, and so we evolved it into Americathon to save America's overwhelming, get them out of their overwhelming debt.
Sure.
Little did we, and we'd say something like, well, how much money should it be? I mean, a trillion? A trillion sounds a little high. Maybe, 990 million. Now, of course, it's ludicrous. It's several $1 trillion. Or God knows how much it is. But we evolved it into Americathon. That's the second part of the book. And then we started to write it, and we got pretty far into it. But then Neil and Peter, as they put it, 2 Jewish brothers got into a fight.
Yeah.
And Neil wanted me to continue on. And I feel it's one of the mistakes that I made in my career, not saying to Peter, I better stay on because then our interests, I can consult with you, and we'll keep the Firesign spirit alive in it.
Sure.
But I didn't out of loyalty to Peter.
Yeah.
And as a result, the film kind of went in another direction.
Right.
And turned out to be not as great as it should be. Although it's still an interesting cult film and very predictive in many ways.
Yeah.
And my friend John Ritter was in it, and Harvey Korman, and all kinds of wonderful actors. So, anyway, that's one story. That's available. And then the other book is called Power. Peter and I did an absolutely amazing Hollywood soap opera on a show called Heat with John Hockenberry, produced by Ted Bonnet, who's still a good friend of mine, and it was basically in the late 90s. It was basically the story of a hot Hollywood agent, powerful Hollywood agent, and his lawyer, and the crazy things that happened in their lives, including a kidnapping of the agent's wife by the Bow Wowers, which is an animal activist.
Okay.
Again, very predictive and very funny. Beautifully produced. I hope it will be made available.
Totally, it's a great serial. We've got
is.
all the audio for it as well.
Yeah, it was
So
really
wonderful.
well recorded and produced. Anyway, I transcribed. Peter and I were transcribing all of these
wow.
for this book, all of the scripts, which are very funny to read. And then he passed away.
Yeah.
So, after a couple of years of mourning, I did that. So that book is available as well.
Yeah.
Power by Proctor and Bergman.
And if I may, the Fighting Clowns book from David, Fighting Clowns of Hollywood, is extraordinary. I helped him edit it, and there's this whole mystery period for Firesign where. The big part of their legacy is their Columbia albums, and then suddenly in '75 they don't have a Columbia contract anymore.
That's right.
Yeah.
And as David observed in his journal, which is published as part of the book, it almost was like Firesign didn't exist unless they were together working on something.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And then there's this whole really interesting 2-year period where they are doing a multitude of live plays, and they're amazing and hilarious and ridiculous and hugely dark and very Brechtian. And then they didn't get a record contract, and they kept going, and they didn't get a record contract, and some of the things get picked up by Rhino. And then it's 1981, and David goes and gets a job, and that's the end of that iteration of Firesign
Yeah, that's
Theatre.
right.
Yeah.
And
That's
nobody
right.
quite knows what happened except for what happened on what you can hear on those Rhino LPs. Well, we've got recordings of some of these old live shows, and these are in David's book are published the scripts for these shows for the first time. So it's all really, really fun stuff.
Are those the shows that we were doing at the Ash Grove?
At the Roxy.
At the Roxy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Multiple shows at the Roxy, all with
that's
completely different scripts, and the amount
That's
of work,
true.
the amount of work they were doing is astounding.
Yeah, Men in Hats and all that. We really were remarkably productive. I mean, it's kind of hard for me to wrap my head around.
Yeah.
Because we were totally immersed in it, and as Taylor suggested, we were doing it even without the awareness that we could exploit it as a record or something, And of course, we didn't really use the visual element as much as we could have.
Sure.
But there's a DVD collection coming out that Taylor is putting the finishing touches on with another fellow named Amy Shore, is that his name?
Oh, Arnie Shore.
Arnie Shore, that will have some of those rare
Oh, that's great.
things, and the Fighting Clown show, right? That's part of it.
Well, what's on the DVD is Just Folks Live at the Roxy, which is
Just Folks. That's another show.
Okay.
one-off show they did in February of '77, and which is great. Single camera, tube camera, and one shot, and it's pretty damn funny. And that's on the DVD with their appearance on the Susskind Show in 1974.
Yes,
Oh,
that
right.
was probably the most exposure that we got on national television, and he was kind of clueless as to who we were, but he was a very good sport about it. Bergman was dressed in a clown suit, and I had a psychedelic shirt on, and we were all, and I think we changed our costumes between segments.
Austin starts the show in an exploding top hat.
Oh my
That's
God.
right.
It's that kind of
that
show.
exploding top hat, which I made, was when we in the stage show of Bozos, when we break the president, he'd come out with this W.C. Fields hat, and I'd rigged the top so that when he's destroyed, springs would boom come out of his head and confetti would fly and everything.
That's so
Well,
good.
that hat I've discovered one day going through reading a variety in an office somewhere. There was a full-page ad for an auction company, and there was a picture of that hat, which had sold for $3,200 or $1,000, something like that, and it said authentic W.C. Fields hat, but it wasn't. It was for Jimmy Durante.
Oh my God.
In the great broadcast of 1938, something like that, and I got it from I got it at the MGM auction.
Wow.
Okay, along with a plaster of Paris barrage balloon from the time. What's it called? H.G. Wells. Time thing. What was it?
The
Time Machine?
Time Machine.
Oh,
Yeah.
really?
Yes.
Really?
Yeah, which we used in the movie Everything You Know Is Wrong.
That's right.
Or
Okay.
not Colonel Goatheart.
Yes,
At
yes,
the
yes.
end when everything falls. That
That's
big
from
bomb
that.
that comes down was
Oh my God. That's amazing.
shot in my garage with the house I shared with my second wife, Sheila Wells. It's in the book. It's all in the book. Now,
book?
by the
The
way,
book. The
if
book,
you
ladies
don't
and
read,
gentlemen.
because people don't read anymore.
Sure.
The pictures, you just look at the pictures.
Sure.
But even better than that, I was in Brooklyn a month ago, which I call Brickland because everything's made out of bricks.
Sure.
And working with Sue Zizza and her husband, engineer David Shin, we recorded the book.
Great.
For eventual release for Grammy consideration as a book on tape, but more importantly, as a podcast.
Oh, all right.
Which will be starting in early June and run for like 23 episodes.
That's great.
I think we're charging 99 cents or something like that for a download.
Yeah.
And I just finished writing the wraparounds, which were recorded a few days ago in their new studio in New York, for a young fellow named Tom Kelly, who already has a podcast show. He's a comedian. Young, I mean, he's in his 30s, young to me. And anyway, he has a following. So it was their idea to have him read the ins and the outs.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so that his following, younger following, can be turned on to Firesign Theatre.
That's great.
So, and the other thing that's nice about it is, just as the book is profusely illustrated, it was our idea to add sound effects, some drop-ins from albums
Great. Okay.
that when they're referred to in here,
Sure.
And musical bridges and things like that.
That's wonderful.
And I haven't heard any of this yet, but
Yeah.
that's what they're doing back in.
I'm
back
excited
in
to
the,
hear that.
Yeah,
That's good.
Yeah. So I actually discovered when we started shopping around for an audiobook company, I discovered that most audiobooks, all they let you do is read the book.
Yes. Yeah.
Now in the early days of audiobooks, there would be sometimes music, sometimes sound effects.
That's what I would prefer.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And the reason why I became involved with L. Ron Hubbard's works was that he was a magnificently prolific writer of many genres, science fiction and horror and fantasy, and detectives and arson stories and pirate stories and all kinds of interesting spiritual stories. And so they decided to record a bunch of them, like 80. I think we recorded 85 of them or something like that. And they were recorded with the addition of Foley, sound effects, walla, and original music.
Oh, wow.
So, and every word of the book, because all the narration is in there too, is translated into a CD. Okay, and I thought this was just wonderful. This is like what Firesign Theatre would do.
Sure.
And that's why I did scores of voices for them and became involved. And now they actually perform various stories at a state-of-the-art theater that they constructed in their publishing building on Hollywood Boulevard. And it's a cabaret type setting. You've seen some of them, haven't you?
No.
No? Oh, yeah, I'll have to come down.
Haven't been in that building in my life.
Okay, well, I eventually, over the years, I've performed on these shows with my wife as well. I've directed some of them. I've narrated some of them. And everybody's standing on this nice stage with a background that can be changed. Like if it's a science fiction show, there'll be a rocket there, or an alien landscape or something. If it's a pirate show, there'll be, ships. It's very clever. And they drop in the sound effects and the music from the episode as it was recorded. It's a wonderful state-of-the-art audio production performed live before an audience.
That's wonderful.
And the next thing that they did was that they eliminated the music stands and the scripts, and they use a teleprompter, 2 teleprompters.
Oh, okay.
So we as actors can speak to the audience directly. We still maintain the idea of we're doing radio and we're talking straight out. We're not looking at one another unless it's a break or something or it's important to the story. But for the most part, we're reading it, performing it.
Yeah.
And it's so liberating.
That's wonderful.
You see? So again, the evolution of technology and how it adds to the emotional effect on an audience and the integration of the audience into the story itself.
StolenDress.com is proud to present Of Dice and Dens, a D&D podcast, starring
Navia the Centaur Fighter,
Eloshana,
Fiznik the Warlock,
Grin, Good Putts.
What's his name? A time-traveling cowboy.
and your Dungeon Master, me, Dan. Join us as we fight wolves.
So the green light leaves your fingertips, enters the face of the wolf, and then it explodes.
Explore creepy places.
The fog gets thicker as you walk toward the building. Suddenly, a giant claw emerges from the fog and grabs at you. It dissipates as quickly as it appeared.
This will all burn off by noon.
And generally keep it classy AF.
Y'all don't need to share in the corner.
Oh, well.
Did y'all share in my corner?
So visit odndpodcast.com or find us on Apple Podcasts and Google Play.
It's posterity, come on in.
Hi, I'm Taylor Jessen, archivist for the Firesign Theatre, and right now I'm scrambling to digitize as much as I possibly can of the Firesign Theatre archive, which I've been sort of maintaining for the last 20-ish years, because the Library of Congress has just agreed to buy it, and it's going to all go away. So I am rescuing things on OpenReel, on DAT, on scripts and documents, and slides, negatives, and oil on AstroTurf painting. Good news is I've captured the oil on AstroTurf painting.
How much was this Bozos developed on stage? Speaking of stage stuff.
Not at all.
No? Okay, not at all.
So far as I can recall.
No? Okay.
This was because it was such a technical subject.
Mm-hmm.
We approached it technically.
Okay.
And I think that was absolutely the right thing to do. Don't Crush That Dwarf, Hand Me the Pliers, as you know from past shows, was evolved from a stage show.
Yeah.
A Life in the Day. and using the technique of channel surfing, channel switching. But this was much more in our heads.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore we did it exclusively in studio.
Was there one of you who was more obsessed with technology than the other, or were there a few of you who were really into it?
It's hard to say. I think Phil Austin was the most producer-ish of us. He kept very careful track records.
Okay.
And he, we all were all involved in the mixing process. Sure. It wasn't so much that we were techno nerds ourselves as we were able to utilize the technology available from an artistic perspective.
Sure.
Which was so much fun.
Yeah.
Do you know
how many tracks you recorded this? Because I know you've talked in the past about we had to double up, quadruple up tracks just to get ourselves 16 tracks. Do you recall how many tracks you were working with or any of that kind of stuff with this album?
Well, all I can say is, it's in the book, is that when we started, we were working with, 10-track tapes, something like that. And so, we'd fill them rapidly.
Right.
And so what we'd have to do is, they call it ping-ponging. They'd have to take a bunch of tracks and put it all on one track.
Yeah.
Okay? And then we could add other tracks to it. As we continued to work, I remember this was so freaky. The tapes got bigger and bigger until the tapes were like this big. They were like big cakes, of tape. And they had 100 tracks on it. See, so we could use as many as we needed to create any given effect.
Yeah.
But it wasn't as though we really have to make multi-tracks here. There were a few albums, some of the Rhino albums I find fault with because we sometimes overloaded the tracks. Okay. And lost the narrative thread, in a clamor. I think our effect was, the effect we were going for was people are overloaded now, with media, and it's driving them crazy. But I think we could have done it a little more subtly than we did in some of those albums.
Right.
So there's an upside to multi-tracking and there's a downside.
Yeah.
So.
Philip, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was going to get a little into the weeds on Bozos because
Sure.
one of the first inside things I was on Usenet in the 90s, and what people were talking about then was how they figured out someone would come forward and say, "Oh my God, I found the book that they are riffing on when they're talking about animals without backbones hid from each other and fell down." So what they determined was that you were basically copy changing an existing children's science book.
Really?
Really? Oh damn! You have no memories of that. So anyway, what we found was you had found
I
a
conveniently
specific
forget any plagiarism.
Yes,
but it was a
plagiarism
children's
you
book.
could
Huh?
forget. Yeah.
Maybe David had it.
Mm-hmm.
David.
But when you're reading, when you and Peter are reading, trailer bikes, sugar bikes, and mosquitoes. That's all from a book, but with just a few words changed.
Really? No
yeah.
kidding.
But on that scene, when you're like, I want to find out. Yeah, in Wall of Science, I want to figure out what you have, what you're picturing that scene is, because what I'm seeing is that obviously you're on a ride, you're in an environment where it's a very Disney Imagineering produced thing, where voices are going to be speaking at you from a speaker, and then suddenly there's you and Bergman, but you sound like you're in a classroom in front of people.
Hall.
You're in a lecture hall. So what I imagine in that scene is that there's this part of the ride where kids at the school or teachers at a school can send in a recording, and if your recording is picked, it will be on the ride. But what are I'm probably completely wrong about that.
Well, no, I envisioned it as being in some kind of a mobile situation, the moving yellow line, and having the story being illustrated to you as you go along. The lights would come up, and there'd be mosquitoes colliding in the air, whatever, and then you enter into a great lecture hall.
Mm-hmm.
See, and you get a slideshow or something, a holographic slideshow.
Okay.
But again, the wonder of what Firesign was able to do is that you could make your own movie. There's a wonderful quote that Harry Anderson, God rest his soul, who left us so abruptly and surprisingly, said about radio. And I'll be damned if I can remember it now, but let's see. It had to do with the fact that the magic of radio is not seeing it, not seeing. I'm gonna have to find it.
Yeah, that's something I believe deeply about radio, which is that it's not just a thing; it's a motor function. It's a thing that will, whether you like it or not, engage your imagination. Because there was
stimulates your brain. It's good for your brain.
There was a whole thread several years ago on Boing Boing about a guy who shot a video in his car driving across Indiana, and there was a stuttering on the radio, just and Final Redemption, 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 and Final Redemption. And there was a whole week of cross posts, people trying to figure out what the station was and what had happened. It was part of the Cavalry radio network, and they didn't care about the network. It was being fed into a strip mall somewhere and then straight to and they'd lost the connections. The last 1 second in the buffer was repeating forever and ever, and blah blah blah. Here's what happened. Oh, we have some interesting stories about.
So it really was a technical.
It really was
glitch.
a technical glitch. But what was amazing was the fact that anybody cared about this at all. You cannot help but care and be intrigued by things that you're seeing on the radio, because somebody is there somewhere, and they are saying this thing. Who could they be? And when you hear something on radio, that is automatically engaged. You are creating a visual.
Yeah, I always felt that what the Firesign Theatre was basically doing was stimulating the mind to make associations. You see, the brain, by my way of thinking, is a holographic thing that basically stores images and emotions and memories and everything all over the place, not in like one. You don't open a door and there's all your childhood.
Right.
It's because what Freud understood was that the unconscious works in symbolic ways. And if you analyze your dreams, you'll see that. You'll see that basically you'll be replaying things that happened to you during the day, because the brain is kind of making connections. I'll put that over here with that image of my mother's legs, and so we created records that were very associative. One idea or image or word would lead surprisingly to some entirely different place.
Yeah.
But there's a logical connection, a synapse, and I felt that kind of would stimulate the brain to work better.
Were you making conscious choices to keep it on track, or did you have something there? Was the script enough to be like, we can keep it on track here, but we can fuck with it as we go? I'm just curious.
Yeah, that's something I've wondered too.
That's a writing skill.
Yeah, if
it's
at the
part of the writing
at the beginning of the album, did you know that Klamm was going to be a hacker, that he was going to blow up the place? Oh, okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because that's another.
We would come to cognitive decisions in writing sessions as to the arc of a story. Not uncommon in a room full of writers. Whether you're doing a television show or whether you're doing a movie, and the difference being the restrictions of the phonographic record. We had so many minutes that we could fill, and of course at the time you could also turn the record over, and we could play with that. And we had two sides. We could tell two different stories, but basically we would think of it as being an arc, a dramatic arc, and that would give us footing, so that we could be in agreement as to what elements we could then add to the story, and it also gave the listener something to hold on to, because some of the earlier albums were very psychedelic in that regard, that they would kind of go all over the place. It wasn't until we did Nick Danger as a record that everybody could say, like, oh yeah, this is a parody of detective movies or radio shows. And so, we can get on board. We can understand this. And that opened our audience, because then they were curious, what else did these guys do? Yeah. But they also got the idea, because it was not that far removed from the associative writing that we were doing before. They could catch on to what it was we were doing. Sure. And if they were hungry for more, we gave it to them.
It's weird how that evolved, because you would think that most groups at the time, everybody of your generation had grown up on radio first, and then immediately got to transition into TV very quickly.
Yes.
So you all had the same reference points. So one would think that the way a group would get together, be like, yeah, let's do this thing that's making fun of old radio, and then eventually everybody gets high and you make this. Like, it just feels like that would be the progression. But the fact that you were, no, let's do a detective thing now, and that worked in this way, that switched everybody to go.
See, that was also because we were evolving all of our stuff. We were still doing radio. And we could try out ideas on the radio. On our radio shows, one of the things that was unique about it was that we would operate independently and bring in material in order to make the other guys break up, or to surprise them with some idea, or to spring a character on them. And because we were so interactive, that would stimulate other kinds of directions for that happen. Dave Osman would bring in a script with parts for us, and we wouldn't rehearse it. We just do it live. And Earl Jive wouldn't rehearse it. He'd drop in sound effects, and it created this wonderful, not only an experience, but it tuned us in a certain way, so that our writing was informed by it.
That makes sense, yeah.
Again, it's always kind of like always hearing it in our heads together, and writing from that perspective, because we knew what medium we were writing for. See, and that was very helpful to us. Nick Danger ended up on the record. It was going to be the pilot for a surrealistic detective series on one of our radio shows.
Okay.
But we lost the radio show.
Yeah.
We went to with the script to do it, and the locks had been changed. And it changed overnight from, a rock and roll station to Hasidic country western. So we said, what are we going to do with this? He said, well, let's put it on the other side.
Yeah.
And so we evolved it again then as a record from that radio idea.
Yeah.
But there's a line in there. We've got lots of places to put them in. This land has lots of something. And,
trousers, mousers, mountains, mud.
And something to put them in when the sun goes down. We had a lot of places to put things in. We always had some place to put it. Put it in the radio show, put it on stage, put it in the record. And we could transmogrify and transform the things that we were working on if we felt that they would be ultimately a commercial property, which is where we're making our bread and butter.
Of course. I want to ask you a little bit about your favorite segment of the album, but I want to very quickly point out that I have this DJ copy of it, intended for DJs, of course, and then they would have these stickers on them
Big
that would
old
say
white sticker,
suggested cuts. They have not indicated any suggested cuts because what the fuck are you going to do? Where do you drop the needle on one of these? That's
right. Well, again, now see that was one of the things that one of the reasons why Peter and I basically started Proctor and Bergman.
Yeah.
Because we felt that Firesign should get more airplay than was possible because of the nature of our albums.
Sure.
See? And so we set out to create short form comic bits that could be played on the radio.
Sure.
And it's proved to be long. It's had a great shelf life because I get checks from a tracking company, and primarily the majority of the monies are from Proctor and Bergman cuts, which is still pertinent.
Yeah.
You know, and that also we wanted to tour, whereas the other boys wanted to stay in Hollywood and make records.
Sure.
And we wanted to go out and tour and meet the audience and evolve material on the road, which we did. And I think it really helped in general to keep the Firesign Theatre in the public eye.
Yeah.
Because it's a lot harder to take four guys on the road, especially if one of them doesn't fly, because Phil didn't fly.
Okay.
He's flying now, God bless him. But
There he goes now.
He didn't fly, and so we had to time all of our bookings, our concert bookings and performance bookings, to coincide with his arrival in a van with his wife and his dogs.
Oh my God.
So what would happen is that we would fly in early and do promotion, and then Phil would arrive, we'd rehearse the show and do the show.
Wow.
Yeah.
Off of this album, is there a particular thing either you remember fondly listening back to, or something you remember recording that really stands out to you as something that was really enjoyable to record? I mean, you're in the whole thing, of course, but...
Well, I think the breaking of the destruction of the mainframe computer of direct readout memory was the thing I remember is most fun.
Yeah,
the most fun. Although the breaking of the president is fun too.
Yes, it is.
But those particular pieces involved all of us, you know.
Yeah.
and so that made it more fun.
When I was listening to it last night, that when you go in there and try and break the president the first time, that's when the album suddenly takes a really interesting turn and becomes something completely that you couldn't predict when you start. Now, I asked you this question back when we did an interview with Doug Harvey on K-Chung back in the day, and I liked your answer, but I want to get your answer in here too, which is that when I've listened back to Dwarf, one thing that strikes me as an interesting character note is that Klamm is there to break the president, but when he's on his way in, he's just as susceptible to all the illusions as
No, wait, are you
everybody
talking
else
about
does.
Dwarf, or are you talking about
Bozos?
Bozos. Yes.
When Klamm's on his way in, even though he's on his way in and he knows exactly what he's doing at the end to ask the questions, when he gets when the holograms get in front of him, he's distracted by the holograms.
Yeah, great illusion.
He and I was wondering all these years whether his character was changing or whether he was the same person all the way through.
No, it's like if you worked for Disney, for instance. Well, you work for Disney, but you know, you might be in accounting, right? You know, or editing tapes or something like that. But when you go to visit the actual theme park, you're just as amazed. You're just amazed as anybody else. You become a kid, because you may have played a tiny part in the creation of a ride or something.
Sure.
But to actually get in the ride, if it works, it's going to distract you. It's going to amaze you. It's going to be entertaining. You know, and so he's in the thrall of the government's vision that they're selling to everybody, as much as everybody else is. Yeah. And yet he is on a mission. Yeah. He's on a mission to bring everything down. Yeah. You know, he's gonna shut it down.
That's a good question, though. That's interesting.
Well, that's really what I figured out over the years is that what Phil's talking about really is true in the world of Imagineering.
Yeah.
Is that you can program the machine and you can program the tubes to go down the water slide ride.
Yeah.
It's a very different thing from actually being on the
That's
ride
right.
and being manipulated like everybody else.
You know
is.
the pun that's in the title? I think we're all Bozos on this bus. Do you know what the pun is?
I don't.
All right. Well, a bus in a computer is a point that leads to other points.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
See?
Yep. All right. Yep.
There we go. It's been delivered.
Christ, holy shit.
That's the whole answer.
Never occurred to me. That's a delight. Do you? Okay. I don't know. Have you had a
And
chance?
by the way,
yes.
Howdy Doody, you see, my Howdy Doody ventriloquist doll also features in the album, and Mickey Mouse, you see.
Uh-huh.
I don't know what David's... Oh,
David's got like a... Yeah,
it's a yin and yang symbol. That's the way computers work.
Sure.
And what's Peter holding? I can't tell.
I don't know.
know.
Maybe you can tell on the photos on the back of the album. Can't remember.
No.
There's a few photos that survive from this photo session, and it's all just them hanging out in front of the cameras.
Yeah.
I love that the cameras on the back of the album are showing different images than what is in front of
I think
this.
I know what it is. I think it's the figure, the clay figure, claymation figure.
Kachina? What are we?
Gumby or something?
Gumby. I think
Really?
It's I think
really?
It's Gumby.
That's amazing.
I think it's Gumby. But in any event, again, it's like pop culture, the effects of pop culture and,
Sure.
on everybody, and Disney's thing, blah, blah, blah.
Phil, this was the first album that you guys did in quad. What do you
Oh,
remember from? What do you
yeah.
remember from mixing
that was really thrilling. We were at the Columbia Studios, and 4 speakers in a fairly small room, and the control panel, and each one of us handled a different character. You know, we would listen to it and we'd say, okay, well, let's walk him from here to there, and let's bring him in behind us here.
Okay.
Right, and let's make that sound go around.
Yeah.
We're playing. We could play. We could
course,
play.
yeah.
And I haven't heard the quadraphonic thing for years, but I remember what a thrill it was to actually be surrounded by our vision.
Yeah.
You know.
There's also something fun about it, the fact that it's comedy. And, you know, the idea that you spent that much time on comedy is very dear to me, but it's also funny. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
To me, it's always, because I know that comedy's kind of frivolous, but it's also my favorite thing in the world.
Yeah.
It's a weird combination of things. Taylor, have you heard them? Because I know we've talked about it briefly. Have you heard the quadraphonic, like, in the actual...
No, I've got them, and I have
got
not heard
them, but you haven't heard them.
It's
All right,
quite
we're gonna have to
easy
make an
in this
effort.
world to imagine there being an audience for it, because anybody who has a home theater set
Surround sound.
who does 5.1 could listen to this quite easily. I've been thinking recently that if not to give too much away, but we would love if we could own all the masters again.
Sure,
that
of
would be
course.
a wonderful thing. But if we
And
can't,
you're working on it, right?
We're kind of working on it.
Okay.
We're talking to the powers that be. If the answer comes back that that's not going to work out, what would be absolutely lovely is a big Columbia era box set with all those masters. But besides the quad version there's a quad version of Bozos, and there is a quad version of Everything You Know Is Wrong. If there are still masters for those albums, what would be wonderful is if we could make 5.1 versions of Giant Rats or Next World, or some of the other stuff that was originated in like 8-track masters. To get surround masters of that stuff from that era made would be fantastic. Because Giant Rat, when we get to Giant Rat, man, are we going to have stuff to talk about.
Yeah.
The immense amount of atmospherics that was that had to be worked out to get that to be reduced to a 2-track LP are just amazing.
Yeah, and that was a show that we did at the Ash Grove with a set that Austin built.
Really?
Which is like a little puppet theater set.
Amazing.
Now, just yesterday, my friend Oscar Arslanian, who used to do publicity for public relations for Firesign Theatre, sent me this picture from my year at Yale, 1960 at Yale.
Amazing.
At the end of a show, Henry VI Part 3, we did a song, "Oh, pardon me, thou bleeding piece, the bleeding piece of earth, ooh," and it was a monologue. And in this picture, I don't know, can you see it?
We got Sam next.
If you send it to me, I can put it in here for sure.
Yes.
Holy shit.
Sam Waterston, Tom Ligon, John Badham, the director of Saturday Night Fever, okay, and John Jenkins. I don't know what became of him, but we were we were the doo-wop group.
Oh my God!
And there we are.
That's phenomenal.
I'll send this to you.
Yeah, please do. Yeah,
you can play with it. But the reason why I brought it up was some stuff at Yale actually influenced me in the work I was to do later, and I didn't think about it until I saw this picture again. During the time that I was at Yale, from 1958 to 1962, there was a guy named Eisenhower, an inventor, who was working on early computerized lighting design.
Okay.
And he basically invented the computer presets lighting board.
Wow.
And we used it in a production that the Dramat did of Camino Real by Tennessee Williams, where Tom Ligon, who's in the front of this song thing, played the Kilroy part, and which was witnessed by none other than Tennessee Williams, who was in town trying out one of his new plays. And he came and saw the show and then met us all backwards with his posse, everybody drinking, liquor out of little Dixie cups.
Of course.
Fantastic. But in that play, we used the Eisenhower board for presets for the first time. And what we did was we put speakers all the way along the side of the theater and the back of the theater. We had a lighting design that when the El Bandito plane, which plays a major part, everybody's trying to get out of this terrible town, and there's a plane that lands that is their only way out. And of course, none of them get on it, and it flies off without them. But the way that our director, Bill Francisco, or Leland Starnes, I can't remember, I'd have to look at the program, designed it, the plane flew over the audience's head, and the lights of the plane moved over the audience's head, and confetti came down, sparkly confetti came down on them, and the roar of the plane went from the stage through the speakers on either side and out the back. Hey, just
That's
like
a
that.
mandolin.
out the front of the into the lobby.
The audiences were pounded by mandolins, and the effect was
so
amazing.
Yeah, and actually in summer stock, I designed sound for another Tennessee Williams play, suddenly last summer. And all this came out of the fact that, as I say in the book, I was inspired by Bob and Ray on the radio and Ernie Kovacs on television.
Sure.
And my dad, who was who raised money, he was an entrepreneur who raised money for inventions and things. Like we saw the first Polaroid camera. He would try to bring investors into these things. He brought tape recorders back. The first tape recorder I had was a wire recorder.
Yeah.
The barbed wire recorder. And then, first it was a record. That's right. A little vinyl record. Then it was a wire recorder. Then it was a tape recorder. Then it was a tape recorder with a radio built in so that I could record the Bob and Ray shows. And I started editing crudely on my own, with scissors and Scotch tape.
Yeah.
And so I was always involved and fascinated by the audio format, okay? And I didn't. And my job at Yale was I was in the audiovisual system. I edited a radio show called Yale Reports, and I saved all of the outtakes. All these famous people, fluffing things and saying things wrong and coughing and burping.
Would you like to comment on? Yes, I would like to comment on it.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, I'm sorry I interrupted you. Well, it was a very polite interruption, and my statement, as I now recall, it seems rather pompous.
Yeah, I cut them all together into Yale Distorts.
Yes. Okay. Yes.
You've heard it?
I've heard parts of it. Yes.
So
good.
Again, meeting Peter Bergman at Yale, and then catching up with him on the radio was the magic culmination of this path that I was on, that I didn't even realize I was on a moving yellow line. You
Right.
know?
Yeah.
And everything came together, and meeting the other guys that same night, all these like-minded people, all of us coming from a funny combination of writing and art, performance, acting, drama, music, comedy and technical interest. Editing and making sound collages and stuff, and using sound effects. It just couldn't have been better.
It's a through line for all of Firesign's work over 30 years that whatever toys you gave them, they'd make the most of. I mean, these guys were making interactive video games in a time when they were still developing the technology to make it make it possible for Firesign to do what they were already doing.
Yeah. We were hired by, and I can't remember his name right now.
Stan Cornin?
Stan Cornin. We were hired by him to write a interactive CD. Excuse me, to write an interactive CD so that Sony could continue to could actually develop such a thing on a visual.
Oh yeah, it was the CDI, right? Which we haven't talked much about on here, but Taylor.
Yeah, that's the Edith Eaton album.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it had embedded in it pictures.
So great.
Okay.
So good.
We had these wonderful shooting sessions, photo sessions, and there are these crazy pictures embedded in the CD. And the premise of the CD was that you had to solve a clue and go to a certain number, so the cuts were all random otherwise, and it would take you through the story. And at the beginning, there was going to be like a payoff. If you could find such and such, figure out such and such a riddle, you could get a prize or something.
We know the riddle now, so if we have to reverse engineer the game from the riddle, God damn it, we can do it. I found the riddle in Austin's notes.
Oh, good. So we were always in the avant-garde. We were always pioneers of the audio medium.
I think the reason this album, to me, works the best is that, and I don't mean this in a cynical way, but all the technology in the story is taken for granted. It's not, there's no moment, and it's like your comedy though, there's no moment where you step aside and give the audience a minute to catch up. It's taken that, no, this is how things are, let's keep going.
It really is it's sui generis, but it is completely understandable the first time you hear it. I mean, I grew up with an Apple II Plus, and what you figure out when you're listening to Bozos for the first time, assuming you were of my age and knew about basic programming, when you get to the part where the artichoke robot has cornered a Klamm and is trying to trick him into going with them. You can hear the moments where your mommy's waiting for you. You can hear where there are just a few seconds pause between the first query, the second query, which is the query you go to when you don't get a response from the first query. You move to the second one, and then the robot moves to the third query. I see. You're too tired or scared to move. You can hear it waiting, and there must be these little edit points in the hologram. You can just picture it where there's like a static edit point, and then it moves on to the next thing, and then it moves on to the next thing. Yeah. And it's not obvious in the record at all, but it's very intuitive.
Yeah, and of course, in the course of my long and strange career, I've done voices for lots of interactive games over the years, and I played an evil computer in one of them. And of course, when you record these things, you're recording all of these things that are in response to the player's choices. Yeah, just like that. Yeah. So great. So that which we predicted, I was able to make a living out of later on in my own career.
So strange. I love that so much. All right, Phil. I don't know when this is going to come out, but let us, first of all, thank you for this album. I love this album.
Good,
it's a delight. Too.
I
only heard it for the first time last night.
Is that right?
Yeah, because I wanted it to be fresh.
Oh, good.
Because the thing is, these I've heard some of them, several times over for other podcasts, but it hasn't been brought up on Comedy on Vinyl before, so I'm like, I want it to be fresh.
Good.
And thank you for this, but also tell people about the book again, because I don't think we've talked about it yet.
All right, well, that we could do it. We could do an interview.
A book?
Now that the podcast is going to be coming out, I'm going to be hiring on Jeff Abraham again, who for practically the entire Firesign Theatre career was our publicist.
Yeah.
And he's a very inventive and wonderful man to work with. So I will be doing a new push to promote the book, which has been selling well, but it could always sell better.
Of course.
And as I say, it's available at Amazon.com, and the podcast will be kicked off when I and my wife Melinda Peterson appear at the Here Now Festival in Kansas City, Missouri, from the 6th of June to the 9th of June.
Okay.
and they're honoring me one evening. There'll be an opportunity for me to talk to the conventioneers about my career and answer questions and things like that. Dave Osman and I are going to be performing on the performance night. We're going to be doing the very same piece, well, an updated version of the piece that we performed in Washington, D.C., right, for the Library of Congress when they announced that they were acquiring our archives.
So great.
And David will be presenting once again the Mark Time Awards.
Great.
Which have been on a kind of a hiatus for a couple of years. So that's all going to be in Kansas City, Missouri. You can go online, HearNow, HearNow.com.
Perfect. Thank you for coming on. Taylor, do you have anything you want to promote? It's going to be the same stuff.
Wait a minute. I'm not coming on, am I? Because that got broke on trouble. Okay? Let's be careful what words we use, all right? Sorry.
Thank you for
Oh, my God, I'm exposed!
Wait
a minute. I better pull the zipper up there.
Jesus, thank God this isn't...
Boy, this is just a waist shot, I hope.
Yeah.
Good, oh, my God.
Taylor, what do you got? What do you want to promote?
Whenever you listen to this podcast, at that time I will be in my apartment at home working on a Firesign reissue project.
Yeah.
The one that I'm doing right now is for David's Fighting Clowns of Hollywood book, and it's kind of astounding because, like I said, this is a whole period that we don't know anything about, and we've got a lot of really great recordings of their stage shows. I got to get in there and clean them up and get like 200 images and put them into. I don't know quite what it wants to be. It depends on whether it's how much material's in there. It could be like a box set, or it could be just a big download thing with a huge PDF at the end. But there's news clippings, there's photos, there's and it's really going to be the companion piece to David's book, and you must get David's book because there's stuff that we don't have recordings of that is in the book that is hilarious.
I learned a lot of stuff from it too, because a lot of it came from his diaries.
Yeah.
And how was he looking at things?
Sure.
And how was I behaving in his eyes, and all that kind of thing, because we all have different perspectives. What I tried to do in my book was, in writing about Firesign Theatre, was to keep it as positive as possible.
Of course.
I talk about the rifts and the distances that happened between us, and the years, the lost years, and all that.
Sure.
But the fact of the matter is, love kept us together.
Yeah.
And love is what bonded us in all of our work. And, just like it was a family of brothers. And I miss Dave and I miss Peter and Phil very much, But that's the way it is.
Well, I'm glad that you've been kind enough to tell me the story of each of these albums. And Taylor, we're not done. I don't mean that to sound this is the last one we're going to talk about.
This is the Columbia years.
Yeah. We're going to be exhaustive, and at some point, I'm going to be responsible for Phil having a heart attack or something, because I'm just going to keep asking him to come on the show. No.
Publicity-wise, the best way to go. Killed by his own podcast.
That's horrible. I'm the worst person in the world. I want everybody also to, well, first of all, buy this album. You can get it everywhere, right? We can get it on the Firesign Theatre website,
Yeah,
correct?
it should be. No.
We
don't own it.
You don't own it?
It should be an iTunes thing. It's, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, Laugh.com, do they distribute it?
Yeah, although that's another story.
Yeah, it's another story. But you can, if you Google it, I'm sure you'll be Googled back.
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
For fun, you should go track down a copy of the Mobile Fidelity Sound Lab.
Oh, the
CD
Mobile
version,
Fidelity,
which had from
like
way back.
Okay.
It sounds the best, and it's got liner notes which were never included in any other copy.
Okay.
That's right.
All right. Then
Mobile
check that
Fidelity.
But buy it from iTunes after you buy that, because then at least some sort of royalty will be going to the Firesign Theatre.
Yeah. And if you're interested in what we're up to, you can go to firesigntheatre.com. And if you're interested in what I'm up to, you go to planetproctor.com.
Perfect. I rarely promote anything, but just go to bit.ly/comedy albums. That's where you can find my mini sketch comedy record label. I say sketch comedy, but our first release this year is going to be a stand-up record. It's a re-release of a 1961 album I can't mention yet, but Taylor is doing most of the work on it.
Indeed.
Hi, Taylor. Taylor has done a ton of work on it.
Wink.
All right, everybody. Thank you guys for listening and watching. I'm Klamm. This is Taylor Jessen. This is Phil Proctor. As always, have a good thing.
Till the next time, stay tuned.
Comedy on Vinyl is a production of Stolen Dress Entertainment. It is produced by Mike Worden and is hosted and edited by Jason Klamm. Our theme song was composed and performed by Richard Levinson. You can email us at podcast@comedyonvinyl.com. You can also send snail mail to Stolen Dress Entertainment, P.O. Box 805, Burbank, California, 91503. Subscribe to Comedy on Vinyl on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and anywhere else you can find podcasts. Give us a 5-star rating and write us a review. It helps. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Comedy on Vinyl, or find everything in one place at comedyonvinyl.com. A major portion of Comedy on Vinyl has been underwritten by Stand Up Records. Please visit standuprecords.com for all your comedy needs and tune in to the new Stand Up Records channel available on the Roku, where you can also find select episodes of this podcast. Visit stolendress.com to listen to our other podcasts, watch videos, and imbibe freely of our multimedia content going back 15 plus years.